All right, good morning everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're excited to talk through ways to really amplify recognition and make sure that, all right, there we go. Have a great conversation today around really how to measure the impact of recognition efforts and setting yourself up for success to truly understand how your program is delivering an impact. My name's Morgan and I'm with Blueboard, one of our hosts today. Just for a quick background for those of you who are new to Blueboard, we're an employee rewards and recognition platform for the modern workforce. What we do is help employees recognize their top people with amazing once-in-a-lifetime experiences that are memorable, personal, and shareable through a platform that's truly built for scale. I'm also joined by Culture Amp, who helps make your company truly a better place to work. They're all about making it easy to collect, understand, and act on employee feedback, which is super valuable and displayed in really beautiful ways. And they help HR leaders make amazing, easy, impactful decisions to really show how their company culture is blossoming and helping them with a competitive edge on this crazy talent market that we're in. So welcome the team from Culture Amp. A few upcoming events just to stay in the loop. We actually have another webinar slated for November 15th. We'll be partnering with Think Human, and this will be all about how crossing off employee bucket list helps them with goal setting and performance. So if you're in the business of really amplifying recognition and helping employees' dreams come true, visit our website at blueboard.com/resources, and you can get registered for that event today. Blueboard will also be present at New York's CHRO Leadership Summit, which is put on by Avanta. That's going to be at the end of the month on November 28th. It's a full day and it's actually free for leadership and HR. So you're welcome to apply to attend via the link shown here, which is avanta.com/CHRO/summits/New York. Culture Amp will be actually hosting an event this Thursday here in Silicon Valley, one of their People Geek Ups, and they're partnering with Juniper Networks. So if you'd like to register for that, you can see the link on screen. That's peoplegeekupsiliconvalley.splashdot.com. And also just for ongoing resources, feel free to stay in the know with us. Blueboard.com/resources is our home for just a collection of ongoing ebooks, case studies, and other webinar recordings that you can either watch on YouTube or on demand, as well as any upcoming events that we're promoting. So feel free to stay in the loop with us there. And similarly, Culture Amp has their own resources page. You can browse People Geek guides, which are really best-in-class tools and tips from experts in the people analytics space, as well as a library with their latest benchmarks, especially great as you think about measuring your own recognition impact data against your peers, as well as the Culture Amp Academy, which is more of a how-to for getting the most out of the Culture Amp tool. So moving along, let's go ahead and introduce our panelists. I'm so excited to have Craig Foreman, who's a senior people scientist at Culture Amp, but also a big recognition lover. He's been in this space for several years as well. So I'm super excited to have him join to share not only how Culture Amp is a great advocate for measuring data, but also his perspective on recognition. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you.
I'm also happy to welcome Carolynn Haug, who's one of our customers actually here at Blueboard. She's the Assistant VP of Employee Communications and Knowledge Management at Equity Residential. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And like I mentioned, I'm Morgan Cheney. I'm our head of marketing here at Blueboard. So diving in quickly to our agenda. First and foremost, how recognition drives engagement and why this is something that we should all care about and start working on today. Then I'll pass it over to Craig, who's going to walk us through really how to effectively measure the impact of recognition through surveys and tools that you can use with Culture Amp or other things that you can bring into your other platforms, general best practices. And then we'll turn it over to more of an interview roundtable. We'll be asking Carolyn a few questions to really learn how she's leveraged her own survey learnings to amplify recognition efforts at Equity Residential. And then we'll move into a period of Q&A. We'll have about 10 to 15 minutes, so please share your questions with us as we go forward. You'll see a Q&A box on screen that'll be a really valuable tool for helping you prioritize questions and actually upvote others So we welcome you to add questions along the way. We'll take them on a first come, first served basis. But if you have anything urgent that you want to chat through, feel free to actually add that into the chat window. That'll be a great tool for just helping us help you if you have any questions with audio, any questions about the recording and recap, or the SHRM certification code that we'll be displaying at the end. And on that note, we will be sharing that PDC code at the top of the hour. It unfortunately can't be included in the recording, so you will need to be present to receive that. You can also let me know after the event if you require a certificate of completion. We'll be happy to get that over to you. All right, so jumping on in, I'll take us through quickly how recognition drives engagement and why it's a priority for us today. So my hunch is for everybody who's joining, recognition is probably very top of mind for you, maybe because you have a program and you're looking for ways to innovate it, or maybe because we're guilty of it showing up as an engagement driver. And when we think about engagement drivers, that's something that's marked within your survey as something that can be improved or should be prioritized. And the cool thing about recognition is that it's pretty low-hanging fruit. Some research from Psychometrics that you'll see on screen showed that actually over half of employees, when surveyed of how leadership could help them improve engagement, simply said, recognize me. At the end of the day, employees want to be seen and valued. And the best way to do that, whether it's through simple verbal recognition, a pat on the back, just letting them know that leadership cares about what they're working on, or more elaborate programs like what we're working on at Blueboard, it's just to show again that they're seen, valued, and that their work really makes an impact at your company. And what happens when recognition is done well? The good news for your engagement surveys is that organizations who do a great job at delivering meaningful rewards and recognition can actually improve engagement scores by 14 points with regards to recognition sentiment. And when we say meaningful, that means that leadership is behind it. Leadership has a vision for recognizing their team. It means that recognition is authentic and it's woven into your culture, and that it actually feels genuine to give and receive as the employee. So thinking through those things, employees crave recognition, and it can help you tremendously improve your engagement impact, knowing that how it's an incredibly valuable tool for motivating and retaining your talent. So as we get started though, where do you stand? The question we have is, for those of you who are doing recognition now, how are you measuring it? We're actually looking at about a $90 billion incentives market right now. And the same research from Deloitte, who showed the 14-point improvement, shows that generally that investment is 87% not effective in driving some of the organizational change you need. That means that it's sometimes unclear to know if your recognition investment is truly making an impact on things like company culture, retention rates, or engagement. And a lot of the times it's because we're just not measuring it. We might be guilty of turning on a program, setting it, and forgetting about it, or maybe just leaning on the vibe or the pulse of the organization in a more softer, qualitative way. So we'll take a quick poll just to get started. You'll see this appear on screen. I'd love to hear from you. Are you, first of all, actively measuring the impact of your program and with regards to how it makes a difference in engagement? So yes or no there. And if yes, how are you actually taking the data? Are you building recognition into your company-wide engagement surveys? Or maybe you're leaning on content from the recognition vendors platform. Or you might just kind of be taking a pulse and having task forces along the way. So I'll give you guys a few more seconds. It looks like a lot of the group, actually 35% so far, is not yet measuring, but a lot of us are, and we are baking that into engagement surveys, which is great. So we'll run that just for another 5 seconds. Great. Let me share those results with you just so everybody can see on screen. So we did actually see that majority of us are not yet measuring, which is why it's great that everyone is here today. And for those of us who are, we are doing a pretty good job of baking those into engagement surveys, which is great. So Craig has a lot of stuff to work from. Wonderful. So let me just go ahead and jump back in. So again, just 1 in 10 of us are measuring, but what we want to do today is really arm you with the tools to go forward. Whether you're using Culture Amp, whether you're using another tool, at least knowing that you have the right mindset to think about when you're thinking about questions and benchmarking and how you can leverage those insights to grow. So on that note, I'll pass it over to Craig, who's really going to help us with a few best practices for effectively measuring the recognition impact that you're having.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Morgan. It's been a long time since you called me a recognition lover. I absolutely am. I did spend some years working specifically in the recognition space. Now I'm really in the kind of overall measurement, but just at a high level before we get into it, I think there's a fundamental human need to be seen and recognized. And even in our surveys, even in questions that aren't necessarily about recognition, I feel like there's that theme comes across, right? My manager has, we have effective and open two-way communication. Like all these things kind of float around this idea of, I think, our desire to be seen. It's a fundamental desire. And I feel like it comes up a lot in the work that we do around measurement and listening to people. So it's so important. But let's dig into this a little bit here and talk specifically, and we're going to start high level. So why does measurement matter? I want to start before you dig into what's on the screen so much and talk a little bit about, why does it matter? What can we do with that? And we spend a lot of time with organizations talking about using measurement to incorporate into storytelling, right? We're trying to drive change inside of organizations, and that data is a critical component, but data alone kind of doesn't land on humans as well as when you incorporate it into some sort of story, connecting the dots. Who's trying to do what? What are we trying to get at? And we do a workshop on that specifically, and we talk about kind of a couple areas of how we can use measurement and why it matters. And one is debunking myth, right? There are a lot of stories that float around organizations. There are a lot of beliefs. There are a lot of things that communicated. So one way we can use data and how using measurement is to debunk myths, right? So I'll give you an example. In this case, it would be, well, recognition doesn't even matter around here. We're not happy and recognition doesn't move the needle. These sorts of things get said in organizations based on things that are going on. But in that case, this is where we can use data to confirm or deny that, and we'll talk more about how specifically to use data, but how do we use data to say, oh, in fact, you know what, that might be true. Or in fact, no, that's not true. What we see here is that those that receive recognition have stronger engagement scores. And we can see that very easily with tools like ours to help really understand that. So that's one. The second would be to confirm a hypothesis, right? So that would be something like, since we began our recognition program, engagement has increased. Again, that's great. But to have some data, maybe you're going to go in and talk to your leaders. You're trying to talk about the efficacy or the impact of your program. To have data that confirms a hypothesis or belief that people have, again, it's kind of like a positive myth. I mean, a hypothesis is just that until we have data to help us prove it true or not. So we can use measurement in that way. And the third, which I think is really critical, and especially in our tools, is it gives us a signal as to where to look, right? So for instance, the question could be, is recognition a driver of engagement? So our tool will help you identify all of these different types of questions to know what are the things that are really driving engagement and where do we need to focus. And in many cases, recognition does come up, right? But we need to know where to look, right? We run surveys, we have a lot of data. The goal in an effective, especially in an engagement survey, is not to just go straight to solutions, but it's really to help us focus on where to look or diagnose. So then we can go spend some more time and really evaluate what are the best ways to move forward, and not spinning our wheels in 15 different places, but really focusing on the one or two places that are gonna have the biggest impact on overall engagement. And oftentimes that's recognition. So in the case of recognition, right here, we have a few questions that I'm showing on the screen here that are from our survey that come up and as a way to measure engagement. These are more specific, right? I put this first one up here. The leaders demonstrate that people are important to the company's success. Now, this isn't the most. You'll see number 2 and 3, right, are very focused. Generally the right people are rewarded and recognized. I receive appropriate recognition for good work. Those second two are very focused. That first one I pulled up, and I'll tell you why. We find that question, that first one, comes up always or almost always in the top 10 drivers pretty much across the board for our surveys, right? So I wanted to call that in as really high level, that it is across the board. Employees are saying that they want the leaders to demonstrate that the people are important. And that pretty much says to me recognition. How else do we demonstrate that people are important? It's through recognition. Again, that's that I see you, right? And this is what our people are craving. We also, and then these questions, generally the right people are rewarded and recognized, or I receive appropriate recognition. Comes up high. I will say that pops up in certain areas than others. We'll see that in a moment. Around, but probably more like media or in hospitality, where we're seeing that as a higher driver of their engagement. Well, we're going to talk about that in a bit. But I will say, before we move on, I just want to say something that comes up a lot around measurement is cadence. And I wanted to speak to that really quickly. And that is, oftentimes, well, how often should we survey? It's a very normal question, especially in a day and age when we have tools and technology that really can allow us to run surveys nonstop all the time. And I think the biggest piece of advice that really seems to land with our clients and when we have these conversations is survey as much as you can act. If you go through the proper process of running an effective survey that's well written, analyzing your information and not jumping to results, but taking some time to understand and really dig in just to make sure that you're properly understanding, like, remember, it's that diagnostic tool, and then taking proper action. So again, picking one or two things and really focusing on those things and communicating to the organization, we heard you, here's what we're doing, here's what you can expect. Then you almost earn the right to repeat. You can survey as much as you'd like. We also say there's no such thing as really survey fatigue, it's lack of action fatigue. That most people are frustrated about the fact that they take surveys, they don't see any action. So they want that action. So rule of thumb, when you're thinking about it, oftentimes leaders want data. That's great. That's what leaders do. But oftentimes in the roles that many of us are in, we have the opportunity to influence that. And we have to remember, this is not just pulling data out of an HRIS or a applicant tracking system. We're we're asking something from people. When they give that information, that comes across, and that's important. So that's, I think, an important piece of this whole why measurement matters. So let's go to the next slide. How to analyze your data, right? So now we've run it, we've collected some data, we have some good stuff. I would say the first thing, and you heard me hint to this before, and I would say stay curious. It's kind of human nature to get information, get results, and want to take action right away. I think oftentimes it's how we're conditioned. But it's really important to take a moment and stay curious. I was speaking to some people yesterday, and one of the things that came up was this idea of this is kind of where bias can creep in. And I don't say bias in a bad way. I say bias in the fact that we all have blind spots based on our perspectives. And when if a group of people sits in a room and looks at those alone, especially like maybe it's just people ops or HR people, they have one perspective. So when you get this information back, you might want to run it by or speak to a couple other people or ask somebody on a particular team, like, what do you think? Why is this coming up? You may learn more. So force yourself when you first get your results to stay curious. The other thing is that we look at data both collectively and we split it by demographics, right? So, you might want to take in the beginning a high level view of your data. How are we doing? What are we seeing across the organization? But also having a tool that allows you to split by demographics. So how are we doing against men versus women? How are our different departments doing against each other? How are we looking based on role or level? Our senior leaders, how engaged are they? And what are their drivers versus our frontline employees, right? So being able to use those demographics to determine what matters. And then another piece I want to talk about that's really important to understand is this, impact on engagement. Do you hear, I've probably referenced it a bit, but I want to talk about what we do in our tool is we have what we call outcome factors, right? So that's engagement. We ask a series of questions that are looking at engagement, which is a sentiment, right? Are you motivated? Do you feel pride? Do you talk about this organization? Would you recommend it to a friend? And also, do you see yourself here in a couple of years, and are you actively looking? Those encapsulate what's commonly understood as what drives engagement, right? But those are sentiment questions. We roll those up and we get an engagement score. But that's outcome. That's what we're looking to measure in the end. You can't pull levers on those, on pride, right? You don't have a manager saying, well, here's pride. So then we ask additional questions underneath that. We consider these factors. And we look at those questions and we say, well, based on the employees at your organization and how they answer these questions, those that were most engaged versus those that were least engaged, which ones of these questions had the biggest impact? And it's an analysis, an impact driver analysis to tell us that, so we can identify what those are, right? At that point, then you can kind of start to consider what is an action area. So, we're going to see at certain organizations. So you can see here, you're looking at some scores that we have from I receive appropriate recognition at work, and we've we've segmented those based on different types of slices, right? Engaging growth companies. These are companies that are growing fast, that have strong engagement scores, down professional services, healthcare, retail, creative media. And you can see that this is these different answers in favorability. So these engaging growth companies, 71% favorability, relatively pretty strong. But you can see as we drop down retail and creative media, that those scores are shrinking, and that might be an area to focus on. Back to what I mentioned before, I want to call out that what we found is retail and creative media also have recognition as a strong driver of engagement. So that tells us maybe that's an area we want to focus on, where maybe in an engaging growth company, that might not be the focus area, right? So being able to use the tools and understand where we want to focus and what makes the most sense to drive engagement in our organizations. And oftentimes it is recognition, but you need to know that. Maybe it's not. And where do we kind of focus to drive the best sort of workplace? Another thing we can do is also comparing. So this is some really great insight as well. You know, asking these questions, putting questions around recognition into your engagement survey will help you both, you know, look at this over time. So you can look at year over year, which I think is really important. You know, how are we doing ourselves independent of any sort of benchmark? Are we moving the needle or not? And that's a way to rate and track yourself. As well as we have a lot of benchmarks that we can load in that allow you to look maybe across region or across certain types of verticals, or based on your size, if you're like a high growth company or a new tech company. All of those benchmarks we're creating, we update those every year based on our data. And you can use those as well to get a better sense and understand where to focus. And then, you know, and then at the end, we're looking at overall, we take that all into consideration just to talk a little bit about our tool, helping you understand where to focus. We take a final look at what is the overall score, right? So that's that favorability. So you may have strong favorability and high impact on engagement. Great, you might be doing great work. But maybe you have a low score with high impact, and we look at benchmark. Collectively, then we can identify and help you understand what are those areas you want to focus on by taking it all into consideration, and that's supporting you. And oftentimes, like we said, that leans towards recognition. All right, so let's go to the next slide. All right, so kind of continuing on around how to analyze, I want to talk about kind of our tool also and how it can really help us do that. So we talked before about demographics. So there are some standard demographics that we can load into the platform, right? And these are things that are coming out of your HRIS. We're getting things like what region, what job level, gender, tenure, you know, all of these that we can load in, and really, you know, the things you'd expect to be able to slice and dice our data to see how are things looking, engagement across different groupings. You load it in, it makes it very easy. However, there's a lot of flexibility also in what you can load in there. So there's all other kinds of demographics, and you know, it's really limitless. I'll give you some examples. Training. I have managers that go through this training program, Manager 101. Some have, some haven't. I can load that in as a data set, and then I can slice and dice and look at managers that have gone through this training versus those that haven't. How is their engagement? And we can see, you know, is there a relationship or some sort of gap there? Same with like mentor-mentee. Maybe we have people that are mentors or mentees. What's the relationship? What's that look like around engagement, right? Is that helping our engagement? You know, can we look at, you know, females that have a mentee or have been a mentor? What does that look like? So, you know, all of that's very possible. And finally, recognition. Why not? You know, in the case of Blueboard, I know that there's people on the call that use Blueboard. You could pull out data directly from your dashboard, where you can say that both somebody has received a Blueboard recognition as one column. Also, another column is have they used it, right? And like I said, this can be taken out of your Blueboard manager dashboard, or you can call this your CSM at Blueboard, and they can do that for you manually. And you can insert that as part of your file with Culture Amp to load that in. And so what you're seeing is, you know, what you're seeing here is on the right-hand side is what we call our heat map. So at the top where it's circled, this could be whatever what we're slicing it by. In this case, we are looking at recognition information. So you see up top, and then we're looking down across all of our engagement factors. Those can be expanded, looking for what are certain gaps. So we can see in this case, somebody that received a Blueboard recognition or a Blueboard opportunity has stronger engagement because it's green. It's stronger than the average across the company. And then we go to the furthest right column. What we're seeing is those that have used it are having even stronger engagement, right? So now this is something you can go back to your leaders and help you validate and talk about your program. right? Things like a myth debunker. Is it true that it's having an impact or not? Well, the data is showing that it is having an impact. Or the hypothesis, since we've started this program, our engagement has gone up. Right? Or again, telling us where to look. This is kind of where the rubber meets the road, helping you quickly hone in and understand what to focus on. And if your programs are in fact hitting the mark and how they're driving engagement, right? So we need data, but data alone is not enough. We really want data with stories. You know, our employees are getting these rewards, they're taking them, and they're more engaged, and they're happier employers by having these special experiences that have been provided by, in this case, Blueboard, to drive engagement. And that's how you can incorporate that into your measurement tools. So,
yeah. Hi, Craig. Sorry, I'm going to jump in really quick. Yeah, just wanted to say that we're so excited to kind of officially share the how-to around this. And for anyone who is a shared customer of both Blueboard and Culture Amp, we can easily chat offline. And like Craig actually mentioned, either working with your CSMs, we'll also be publishing more of a document around this to really walk through how you can pull this data in, leveraging Culture Amp's tools. But
yeah,
we actually offer more of a micro level view of data through our post-experience surveys. So that might be specifically to the individual. How did they feel with regards to more motivated, more likely to stay at the company, more appreciated, as well as how they valued the Blueboard experience itself. So that's on the macro level, but we love that with Culture Amp, we can also have this macro level view of company-wide. How did individuals who not only received the reward, but also completed it, how does their sentiment change over time? So yeah, we're super excited for this, and we'll be sharing more details of actually how to implement this as a follow-up to the webinar today.
Got one thing I'll add. Anybody that's on the call, if you're a Culture Amp client and you are, things I just said about demographics, or you had some ideas come in your mind, you think about loading others, you can always reach out to support@cultureamp.com, and we can also help you with your data file to update those. All right, I think it's time to move on, yeah? Great. Well, with that, we're going to move into the next phase of our webinar here, and that's bringing Carolyn in to have a really conversation from somebody that's done it, that's living it, and using these tools in their organizations. So, welcome, Carolyn.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Let me turn my video on too. It's video time. All right. So, I know both Morgan and I will ask some questions, but I will open this up and ask you the first question of how did you initially diagnose recognition as an area of focus? So we're talking about, using tools to understand, like what was your story and how did this come to be?
Sure. So in 2016, I became responsible for our engagement survey, and we've done an engagement survey for many years, but our engagement tends to be very high. And so I think our leadership was getting kind of bored with listening to how high it was. So when I got it, I decided to take a really deep dive and look at engagement over a period of time. And what I noticed was in 2016, it was our lowest engagement score in 8 years, and it was trending downward. And so I raised the alarm and said, we have to do something. Just as you said, in terms of digging into the data and slicing and dicing it, which, engagement data season is, one of my favorite times of year. But digging in and really seeing what it said, what we noticed was that recognition was our #1 driver, and our employees, particularly our corporate employees, were not happy with the lack of recognition in our culture. So we have about 2,700 employees, and about, I'd say about 600 of those are corporate employees. So we really decided that first year to do some digging based on the data to find out what it really meant and what people needed.
Got it. So pretty straightforward, like we talked about. You had some data to support you, and you focused in and realized that was one of your high drivers of engagement. So then the next piece, I have to imagine a lot of people are wondering this. Like it's one thing to see this as somebody that works in the people space, but then really rallying your leadership or getting support. Like how did you go about getting the buy-in to improve the recognition program from your leaders? And were there certain data points that you leaned on, even beyond the engagement survey to gain that buy-in? I think a lot of people are always wondering this question.
So I come from an organization development background, so my approach to change in any way is to get a lot of opinions, a lot of data from both quantitative as well as qualitative. So we created a focus group of corporate employees, multi-level, multi-discipline, and we asked a lot of questions about what's working, what's not, and kind of what gets in the way. We gathered all that data, summarized it. We also worked with them on, what would be kind of an ideal program? What would they think would be valuable, and really meaningful? We also did our research outside where we, read a lot, studied, and really found out what are some of the best practices, what are some of the norms. And then we put together a few ideas and we asked the sounding board again. This is all before the leaders really got involved. Mm-hmm. It was really just, let's find out what the employees are saying first. So we put some ideas in front of them and they really liked the ideas. However, what they said was, it's not practical. We can't go from nothing to everything, overnight. And we don't think our managers here are really good at doing this. So we don't think that it'll work. It's not going to stick. So we simplified everything and we came up with 3 tiers. One was just simple thank you notes that we had printed up and, given out to everyone with our values on it. We also have a coin that we give out to our employees, which has a $250 value. And then the third was our Spotlight Award. So one of our values is share the spotlight. Once we kind of got it to this very simple, thank you, spot bonus, and like a big prize at the end, at the end of the year, we then presented it to our executives. The way that we get, kind of buy-in, our approach is we talk to all of them like kind of outside and answer a lot of their questions before we get into that meeting. But we also engagement's very important here, and our executives, as part of their annual bonus, they have a matrix where engagement is part of that. So it is important to them. But also when I was able to correlate the data to show that, we have one statement, our number one driver that year was if I contribute to equity success, I'll be recognized. Another one of our drivers was senior leaders of equity value people as their most important resource. And that one didn't get rated as highly as we would want that either. So I was able to, kind of point to, our employees are not getting something from you and they really need it. And so let's look at what we can do. So once we went back and forth, and I will say that normally a lot of things, there's a lot of pushback on budget and, a lot of questions. However, in this case, because we were able to point to the data and we were able to point to all the employee feedback we gathered, we were able to present a great business case for saying, we need to do something differently. And they were skeptical. They thought our corporate employees wouldn't care about the coin. They were skeptical about an experience as a solution. But they let us give it a try. We said, we'll try it and we'll see kind of how things go. And if it doesn't work, we'll, do something differently.
That's awesome. I mean, a couple things that jump out. One is I talked earlier about using your engagement tools not to solve a problem, but to diagnose. And it sounds like you really did that. So you found out this was the driver. You didn't jump straight to solution. Now you knew where to focus, and you did that. You did those focus groups. You talked to people, right, to better understand. So I think that's a great example of doing that. The other piece that you spoke about I thought was really great was that we talked about the power of emerging data with kind of story in essence to drive change. And it sounds like you did that. You took that question, which is the one that we just talked about that we see across the board as leaders, show that people are important. But you use that as a way to kind of really emotionally connect to your leaders, as a data point and saying that we can do better, and like it made it personal for them. I think it's important for driving change.
Yeah, it did. And they didn't like that feeling, so they're like, okay, let's
make it stop. No, but it's a great example for people that are listening of ways to really, if we just roll in with data, sometimes people don't move based on data. There's an
the story does make a big difference. Yeah.
Connecting to the human. So awesome. And then my next question is, how did you come to find Blueboard? So in all that work, how did you find Blueboard?
Well, we presented the idea of an experience without having a vendor to do this. And we had been looking at how can we do this in-house, and then we realized it was going to take like an extra body, an extra person to really to manage that. So we were doing our research, and we found vendors that there was stuff, but it wasn't really the experience that we wanted.
Yeah.
And we happened across Blueboard, and I'll tell you, when Blueboard gave their first demo to us, we were like, oh my gosh, that's what we've been looking for so long. And it was just, it was like, we found our winner. And so, what we loved about it is they would handle everything. Basically, we would give them the names of who was a recipient of the Spotlight Award, and the system would kind of manage it. The concierge would reach out. And it just made it so easy from an administration, and the experiences are so kind of tailored to what the person really wants, that it's just really made some great memorable stories. We also know that, money, gets forgotten. It comes in the paycheck, and you pay your bills with it or something. A gift card is nice too, but it's still, just money that can be used for, your stuff. But an experience is something that creates a lot of memories, and those memories last. And for the company and for the employee, it's something that's a lot more valuable in the long run. But what we also notice is that the recognition is important for the giver, the receiver, and the observers of recognition. And this new program, we really made the observer role much more significant, so we could share those great things. So with Spotlight, we were able to award the recipients as well as share all their stories afterwards, so that, again, it's going more deeply into the culture to share what we are doing for recognition.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of great points. I love and I've spoken about that too. This like left brain, right brain part. If money goes right to the left side, it's quantifiable, mathematic, but experience is on the right side. That really lasts with us. Also, just to anybody that's also measurement, another thing people measurement is looking at engagement. What you said about not just the receivers, but the givers. And I've seen some research around looking at engagement of people that are given, which is also quantifiable, and you can pull into your data set. Have they given a recognition in the last 90 days? Have you received one in the last 90 days? Looking at our engagement levels based on that. It's pretty powerful that giving is sometimes more powerful than receiving. So I'm really happy you called that in. So Morgan, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll take it away. Carolyn kind of already got us started on just the topic of socialization, but I love that when you think about the program launch, you thought about that giver, receiver, and the observer, because when you are thinking about tackling a company-wide need, it can't just be siloed. It needs to be a program that really does affect everyone, even if they're just nominating someone. Like Craig said, sometimes it's nice just to be part of the process and really feel good about bringing up someone who has done great work so that they can be rewarded, and you can be part of that initiative as well. And really, if people don't see the program, how will the company-wide sentiment change, right? You really want to make sure that there's great visibility, there's awareness and adoption. And we actually talk about that at Blueboard in the vein of the Blueboard method. And for those of our customers are very familiar with that. But the idea is that it really does start with awareness and then moves into anticipation and adoption and so forth. But it's really an entire company initiative, and everybody should have a role to play, even if there's only a finite amount of rewards. So I'd love to dig into a little bit about the tactics of the socialization plan that you rolled out. We have a photo here on screen of some of the task force and kind of secret dust decoration that was happening. But Carolyn, talk to us a little bit about the strategy behind the launch and some of the tactics that you rolled out for that really exciting launch day.
So it was really exciting. Something you said about like making sure the observers are part of it. Part of the feedback we heard was that people didn't know what was happening. So recognition was happening, but because people couldn't see it, they didn't think it was happening. So for this, we wanted to make sure everybody knew, and it was a big splash. So again, this is our corporate employees, and we have our main headquarters here in Chicago, but offices all over. We ended up with a winner in at least every office. And so we had as you can see in the picture, we got big blue balloons and we had the certificate, and it was a Monday morning, and we had like little helpers all around the country going in, purchasing these things and setting up the person's desk. So when they came in on that Monday morning, they saw that they were a recipient. They didn't really know why yet. So we worked with the managers and the nominators to, find a way to give them the why in a way that would be meaningful to them. So if there's somebody who likes a lot of recognition in front of people, do something at a large gathering. If there's somebody who really likes things more private, you can have that conversation with them, when you're ready. But just make sure it's that week. Once we knew everybody was told their why they received it, our CEO sent out a communication that shared everybody's names. We also have a few different ways we communicate with our employees through like our television screens in our corporate office, through a weekly huddle meeting that happens in all of our field organization, and a corporate newsletter. So we took photos of all the recipients with their why and put together a video, sent that out in all those different venues or avenues, and shared the why people receive this. Then once we have received people on their experiences, we then have been sharing the stories of the experience on our company intranet, and also like on the TVs and the newsletter, that kind of thing. So we're not only, recognizing that person, it's kind of a repeated recognition when they get to see their stories being told as well.
Yeah.
But more people are starting to see, kind of what's happening. And it's really kind of taken on, that first time we gave out 38 awards, and we decided after the first time we wanted to do it twice a year rather than once a year. So we have now an award in June and one in November. That the June award, we had 17. We are just in the nomination process now. We have 54 people that have been nominated, and we're kind of whittling down to determine who's going to get it. But again, it's a big splash. Everybody sees it. Everybody knows about it. And I will say that first time, people were just so excited to see their teammates get the award. I mean, there was the vibe in the office and across the country, that this excitement that, it was visible and people could really feel that something had been done.
That's awesome. Yeah, especially when you're talking about the questions around like, is leadership recognizing me? Do they see that I'm doing hard work here? Like I mentioned before, even if you're not the recipient, just knowing that recognition is happening is so powerful. And we've actually had customers beforehand, one that was actually shared with Culture Amp as well, that happened to have their biannual survey launch right after they just announced their new recognition program with Blueboard, and did see a tremendous uptick in recognition sentiment just from the fact that finally leadership was actually doing something, and the program hadn't even launched yet. They had just announced it at an all hands. So you'd be surprised really how valuable just showing that action is happening. Yes. And I loved Craig's comment earlier about survey only as often as you plan to take action, because the worst thing is to take the survey and then not show change. So I love that you really embraced the insight and then thought through a really genuine leadership driven program, and were able to really show the value and show that you heard what the employees were wanting and really brought that to life in a meaningful way.
I will say you used the word genuine, and that was something that our focus group said, we don't want anything if it's not going to be genuine. And so that was another conversation we had with our leaders. When we rolled this out, we met with each department to kind of share the new plan. We had some leader training on, how to give recognition, because we realized that was lacking. But for a little while, it was, it was awkward because people were giving recognition that you weren't used to it, and it just felt strange. But it's kind of like taken on. So now, it's really great to see our leaders really making the effort and really trying to be genuine. That piece of it has been significant for the success of this. And it's really, they do value the people, it's just, they just need to adopt the behaviors, or really, demonstrate those behaviors that really help people feel that. And that's really what we worked with our leadership on as well.
Yeah, I love that you had a whole training initiative too, because like you mentioned, sometimes we are different personality types, we have different love languages, different everything. And some people aren't as comfortable, or that's just not top of mind. It's not that they don't see or value the work, it's just how they get into the habit of it.
Right.
But if you can have a culture that really centers around recognition, that's a win-win for everybody. And it becomes easier each time that you pull someone aside and thank them for something or participate in a program like this.
And, you know, I did talk when we first started doing this, I talked about, you know, creating a culture of recognition, and that was so uncomfortable for some people. So I know that the words that we choose, sometimes are just, you know, off-putting to some types. And so, you know, sometimes some of these things we have to do are really stealth, you know, so we create it without calling it, you know,
Yeah.
until it's comfortable for people, and then we can just call it what it is.
Yeah,
Sure.
and I've learned with things like this too. Sometimes the experience is more important. I think most humans, the experience of being recognized and seen is really powerful. But sometimes telling people, or so sometimes it's just getting the program going and starting to live it, so people can start to experience it, and then want to share that same power back with others.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, great. So moving on, just the next question is really, what have you learned and how has the sentiment changed? So we know that there's a lot of visibility. We're actually looking at even photos here from some of your employees that have gone out about and now completed the experiences that I know you're sharing internally. But yeah, let's go ahead and change the conversation to now you've had a new survey, and what did you see change with regards to recognition sentiment in the last round of results?
So we have seen an uptick in recognition from our engagement score for our corporate employees. We did see a downtick for our field employees. So we, you know, when I mentioned at the beginning of this that our field was strong a couple of years ago, but we were kind of seeing that there's something going on. So we're seeing that what we're doing on the corporate side is working. I think the reinforcement and the reminding and the, you know, kind of just continuing to tell the story, we need to continue that, and that'll continue to help that, the feeling for people here on recognition. But now it's time to really look at our field organization and find out, you know, what's not working there and how we might be able to apply some of this to our field employees as well.
Great. And what was the notion around, I know for the corporate side, just seeing especially that strong uptick, was that able to be shared with leadership? Did they kind of rally around that, or was there excitement, or kind of what was that process like?
You know, when our engagement score goes up, you know, it has gone up since, you know, a couple of years ago. And when I was able to share back, like, look what we've done, you know, what all this work has created, you know, happier employees, more engaged employees, which means more productive employees. You know, they're really pleased. And so, you know, again, engagement's important, and we want our employees to feel great. You know, the data just helps to show that, which is, and we're a very data-driven company. So when our leaders see data, they're really happy.
For sure. Besides, you talked about kind of having more of a task force, or kind of, you know, you asked a lot of questions and had that task force group initially. Have you gone back and continued to use that task force now that the data is improving, to continue ideating around how to evolve the program in the future, or what does that process look like for next?
That's a great question. We have not, and I think that we need to do that and get some more feedback from them, because now it's, you know, round 3. You know, we do often, once we roll out something, we wait a while, and then we, you know, do another kind of questioning to find out if it's working. So I think that's the next step for us on the corporate side, and on the field side, it's starting that whole process, getting a group together and starting to ask those questions again.
Yeah, absolutely. Craig, I'd love to hear at Culture Amp, as you guys analyze your own internal data, do you guys also lean on kind of the qualitative focus group paired with the engagement data that's more quantitative, or how do you guys kind of rally around?
100%. We really try to embody what I think we're working with organizations to drive towards, right? So absolutely. And not only that, we do it at multi-levels throughout our organization. So survey as much as you I talked before about survey as much as you can act. I saw a question come across just to let you know what we do. We run 2 large engagement surveys twice a year, right? That's our baseline, letting us know where we stand across the board. From those, we pick focus areas, right? So we're very intentional about picking 1 to 2 focus areas, and really those are going to be our key focus areas for the next 6 months. And then those off quarters, right? So let's say quarter 1 and 3, we do our large engagement surveys, and quarter 3 and 4, we do our, we consider more of a small pulse survey. And that's focusing in on how are we doing on the focus areas. It's a much smaller one that's about the action we're taking. It's also sending that signal, reminding people like, we listened, we heard you, we're focused on it, how are we doing? Versus like, let's get a new benchmark or gauge. So twice a year, we're learning that. But not only do we do that, every time we run these surveys, we ask our teams to get together and do their own analysis. So the organization comes back and says, here's the focus area organizationally, and then ask our smaller teams to come together and do our own analysis and take a look and say, well, you know, as we slice it, you know, maybe different what we're finding in our team. Is there 1 or 2 things as a team that we want to incorporate in the next 6 months and focus on? So we work really hard to do that and to come together, have those discussions, to dig in, to get everybody in the organization gets access to the information, so we can spend some time with it prior to those meetings and come in prepared to say, well, here's what I'm seeing, or what do you think, or here's my assumption. And sometimes everybody agrees, and sometimes we have interesting conversation that leads to a different perspective that no one thought of walking in the room. So we definitely are practicing what we preach around that. Cool.
Any exciting kind of new proactive initiatives you guys are working on in this current quarter at a high level that you want to share, or?
Collaboration has been the biggest one for us. Most recently, we're working on collaboration that came up in one of our recent ones, and recognition has come up for us. So we too are working really hard, and I think we do a great job, but we have more room to grow and more people want more of it. So we're looking at how can we enhance our recognition programs as well.
Nice. Very cool. So we have about 10 minutes left. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to a quick wrap up, and then we'll jump into Q&A. So as we think through key learnings, the main thing is, of course, starting with the right question. So if you're not measuring yet, or if you are doing some measurement, thinking about the questions that you want to ask, and Craig shared 3 great ones that are really going to give you a solid, unbiased baseline to work from. Using consistent questions will also help you benchmark year over year. So of course, starting with the right questions. Next up, again, how do you compare to your peers? So either looking at your own historical data to track progress, in the case of how Carolyn has shown her engagement scores improving over time, or even thinking about comparing against your peers. So using some of the favorability benchmarks that Craig shared, or looking at your own internal tools that you use, whether with Culture Amp or other partners, to see what data they're able to provide from a more narrowed peer set. From there, when you're thinking about innovating your program, really thinking about rewards that are not only sociable, but also shareable, so that you can cast a wide net around recognition and not have that be siloed just with the recipients, but also really inclusive of those giving the recognition as a manager or an HR leader, or as those who are observing. So those that get to see the recognition stories play out at town halls, on company newsletters, on Slack channels, for example, things like that. And then lastly, continuing to learn and evolve. So just as we're talking about today, you know, not everything is a home run out of the park. We're going to always have learnings, good and bad, and how do you continue to use data either in your surveys or in focus groups to continue to evolve and build, to make sure the recognition program continues to deliver on the notion of genuineness, authenticity, and ultimately delivering an impact company-wide. So with that, we're going to move ahead into the Q&A. We actually have a lot of great questions that have come through. I'm going to jump into some of the live ones because they're really timely. So the first one is actually directed to Carolyn from Trevor, who wrote in saying that you mentioned doing research into recognition. Were there any specific pieces of literature or any things like that that you recall, Carolyn, that was really helpful, or maybe just a destination generally that you were reading up on for recognition learnings?
Sure, yes. There are some companies that really focus on recognition. That's their main product, and you know, giving out rewards or there are systems, you know, that help administer the reward process. And so they publish a lot of white papers, and there's a lot of resources, I would say, you know, different HR sites that, you know, show the data. There's books out there. I spent a day at OC Tanner in Salt Lake City to learn from them. I've attended Work Human, which is a conference that is all about, you know, making work great for people, has a big, that's by Global Force. They have a big recognition platform as well. So we really it took us a year to figure this out, but a lot of that was because we had to really experience, you know, what are other companies doing? What are some of the recognition companies recommending? And really finding that right balance for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll make one more plug just for our own resource center. So we're producing a lot of ebooks, whether that's helping you calculate your recognition ROI, which is the tool that we actually pasted in the chat earlier that has a lot of the same insights that Craig shared as well. Or whether it's like more of a buyer's guide, thinking through planning and setting your program, or other just best practices for building against really common challenges like employer branding, employee motivation, or retention. So feel free to check out Blueboard as well for some of those. But definitely recommend the conferences that Carolyn was mentioning. We also attend Total Rewards, which is put on by World at Work, which is a really specific conversation around recognition and compensation across the board. So that's one to check out also. Great. So the next question is coming from Catherine. She asked, what percentage of payroll is a best practice for a recognition program? It's really interesting, Catherine, that you asked that, just because we've done a lot of research, and SHRM actually recommends that you invest 1% to 2% of someone's salary annually into recognition and rewards, because the offset is they might leave, and to replace someone can cost more than 75% of someone's salary to replace them. So you can have a short-term kind of investment of 1% to 2%, but longevity in that person's career, versus potentially losing someone because they don't feel seen or valued, and then having the recruiting and hiring and onboarding costs to replace them. However, we've done a lot of research lately and see that people are sometimes following that model of a per employee basis, or also taking it totally separately and thinking more holistically around program budgets and thinking about how many people a program might affect and what the recognition rewards will look like, and then calculating a budget from there. But generally the SHRM recommendation is the 1% to 2% of salary.
And on that, I want to piggyback on that.
Yeah.
I also, one of the things that we read was that you want to have about 2/3 of your population getting some kind of recognition, and it's not necessarily formal. We're looking at trying to get our formal recognition to about 20%, maybe 30% over time. But the more that people are seeing it and feeling it, the more it's going to create engagement, and the more, again, people are going to want to stay and just enjoy the culture that they're working in.
Absolutely. So another question came in from Francesca. She's asking, how do you handle recognition for remote employees? And actually, I believe this stat is by 2020, more than half of our workforce will be remote or partially remote. At Blueboard, we actually do work from home Wednesdays, so we have a part-time remote option for employees who like to just have the time to not have to commute in, or maybe to catch up on errands or work more kind of like siloed at home. So Carolyn, knowing that a lot of your team is dispersed and having a lot of people who are really in the field, either running properties or servicing buildings and things like that, how have you seen the program kind of affect them as an observer or a participant? And do you have any other best practices?
Sure. Well, I guess a couple things on that. One is we have had some remote employees that work from their home receive the award, and that's been really fun because what we've done is we've blown up the balloon here and, shipped it to them, so it arrives on the same day. We make sure the UPS delivers on the same day that everybody else gets it, and they open up and they get the balloon and their certificate, and then their boss reaches out to them. So that's been fun. In offices where we have other employees nearby, like I said, we find other people that can help be our partners, to help deliver that. But the remote employees, people, again, I think it's through our communication strategy that really makes the difference, so that everybody in the company is getting the same message, regardless of where you work. That is a really important part of our communication strategy, is that we want to make sure that everybody's getting the information that they need, and it's being dispersed in many different ways so that depending on kind of your avenue, you can get your information.
Yeah, and I'll just say on our end, we have a lot of customers with Blueboard who are having also remote and even sometimes globally remote employees. So again, that notion of shareability is really important. So having resources, whether it is newsletters or company town halls, we even have people who have like printouts in bathroom stalls as people are reading, kind of a common practice. I actually had that at Google too, which is pretty funny. Also shared communication channels. So Slack, for example, we have a best practice of having a dedicated Slack channel if you use Slack at your workforce to be able to have people ask questions, show off their recognition stories, photos and videos after they complete their experiences. Sometimes people use Facebook at work and have dedicated channels specifically for recognition. So having those stories and seeing what people choose on their own is such a cool way to get to know someone. You might have a network engineer who's remote, who may seem a little bit more introverted, and then all of a sudden they're going skydiving for the first time, and that's really cool and surprising. So because of the element of choice with Blueboard, it does help to kind of show off someone's personality and really help them connect through photos and videos and stories of their experience with others who they don't immediately work with daily in the same office. So that's been a really cool thing to watch too. I have one last question because I know we're almost at time. I wanted to direct this one back to Craig. Nat at Health Grades had actually written in before the event just with some questions around common metrics that executives want to see when you're trying to get buy-in around engagement. And kind of a follow-along question that came through was how do you kind of like prevent people who are maybe skeptical of bringing on new engagement tools, like something like a survey tool like Culture Amp? So Craig, on your end, are there key metrics that people really want to focus on from a leadership perspective? And is there anything that you can help kind of use that data for when really getting buy-in from leadership?
Well, I'll answer the first one. I think, and we'll go for the second one. Metric. You know, leaders want high-level information. That's typically what they're looking for. So the first thing I would say was, you know, when you're going to go present to leaders, organize your data as clean, really hit the bullet points that they want to hear and not like go down those rabbit holes in the data. So what do they want to hear? They want to know, they want to see engagement as an outcome, right? They're looking at the outcomes. They want to see, you know, profit, engagement, these big outcome factors, right? How are we doing? But also we talked about impact on engagement. That's what they want to know. You know, what's driving engagement here? So oftentimes when I'm coaching people around this, it's like, high, low, how are we doing? What are we doing well? What are we not? What are room for opportunities? What are some areas that we can grow? Anything interesting that jumped out in the data? And a few, like, what are our next steps? So I think really if you go and prepare with those and you're ready to speak to those, that'll do the job. And then if leaders want some additional information, they can ask for it. You can go back and present that. But I think to roll in there saying, look, 10 minutes, I'm going to lay it out for you. This is what we're doing. And really just be really crisp and clear on that. And what was the second question? Repeat that.
Any kind of skepticism that might come from leadership with regards to bringing on new tools, like a survey tool, for example. How do you kind of show the value of having that data in one place, or, you know, the ability to, I think a lot of it is kind of coming down to features, but what are some things that you guys really celebrate?
I think there's skepticism. I think often though, it's really skepticism around, look, humans have a natural, like, don't always want the lights being shown on things, right? It's better sometimes, you don't know. I mean, I don't like that, but I talk about it as like the Fitbit effect, right? When you put a Fitbit on, once it's on, even if you're not getting your steps, you know you're not getting your steps. And it's just like, you know, are people resistant to putting a Fitbit on? Yeah, are they ready to really take in the information? But what we know, and more is becoming clear, that progressive organizations that are becoming leaders, are really engaging in a relationship with their employees and engaging that listening cycle. So it can be challenging, we understand that. The other piece is, you know, look, if it's a decision maker, we have to overcome that. But oftentimes we roll it out, and there are some people in the organizations that are skeptical and not sure. And we always talk about use it in a good way, show that you're using this to engage with employees, taking action, and the people will come along. Typically it's coming from a place of distrust. They're not sure. And let's be honest, historically, organizations have lent themselves to some of those beliefs. I mean, I think a lot of us have had bad experiences, and people sometimes can be not so trustworthy. So instead of getting too wrapped up in it, just come from a place of, we're going to do this, we're going to do it in a good way and show that it's trustworthy. And I think combat it that way versus trying to combat it beforehand. Start rolling it out, start doing it the right way, and people tend to come along because they want to be heard and seen.
Yeah, and like you said, just breaking it down and saying we're just going to do one or two things, you know, after this. It doesn't mean that we're going to change everything. But we are going to do something, and we're going to agree to what that is. So I think that helps too. Just stomach it and be like, we might get a lot of stuff back, but we're going to do one step at a time.
Absolutely.
Carolyn, we're going to add something too.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, no, I completely agree. I think, you know, starting small, starting a pilot, starting with just a few ideas and getting some results that you could then share back, that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Well, great. We went through most of the questions and we are at time. So we've had the SHRM certification code on screen. It's 18TR64Z. And for anyone who needs that certificate of completion, you're welcome to email me and I'll get that over to you. But we are at time. So I wanted to say thank you again to Craig and Carolyn for being part of our panel today. I loved having you. And more to come. Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. And have a great day for everyone else who's still on the line with us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.